More advanced level of working with addictions and habits and compulsions. In Colourpuncture, we have specific training. It's a one-day training. It's called addictions. If you're only starting with Colourpuncture, this is not something suitable for you because there are many concepts there which you cannot grasp. Having said that, if you're only starting with Colourpuncture and if you have somebody with addiction problem, or you yourself has addiction problem, then basically you can consider taking this training sooner rather than later. And on this training, we work on several levels. So first level is level of ancestry. Usually what is called addictions or addictive personality is something that runs in the family. Quite possibly that this is something that didn't develop just within one individual lifetime. So quite possibly there was several generations of people who were indulging in some kind of addictions. And sometimes it could be so carefully hidden. So, for example, you're coming from a family of people who work hard. And then what you find with these people, they can live their entire life and then they can die without having spoken to their family members on a soul level ever. And is it not an addiction? And those are people who get retired and then they totally lose meaning of their life because their very identity was so tied in with hard work and they just cannot face retirement. Especially true with men somehow, because women, especially if woman was involved with children and house, it is different because there is some degree of part-time involvement. In my particular family with my parents, it was completely different. It was totally other way around because my father had a lot of hobbies, always lots of hobbies. And for him, retirement was like, yes, bring it on. I can finally dedicate myself to all this gardening and beekeeping. And for my mom, it was very, very difficult because even so, she was involved with the house and she was an amazing housekeeper. And her primary identity was that of work. And that was very difficult for her. But usually, on average, I observe it with men. And people work hard and then they suddenly, from coming from this place of very high engagement, and if you think about it in terms of soul spirit, then when you are placing your energy and your focus consistently, most of the time somewhere and not inside yourself or not within your immediate environment, then suddenly you find yourself at home, retired, 100%. You probably don't know what to do because you didn't develop any hobbies, or very often relationship problems come up. This couple who used to function perfectly because the man typically was at work all the time, the woman stayed more home and with children, suddenly they are together. And whatever conflicts they had in whichever little form, which they didn't even get to talk about because they could always just go to their separate domains and this will resolve the questions. And suddenly they are together. And this could be interesting, but obviously it isn't fun for a couple. When something like that happens, if you think energetically what is happening, we are coming from a level of very high investment of our energy into this somewhere, into this energy just staying with us, and we don't know what to do with it because, again, sometimes we cannot be properly integrated on a level body, soul, and spirit. And we cannot quite commit it to this life and to this body in terms of being. And this is why we spend the whole lifetime doing it, because it's much easier to do something because you can see it, you get praised for it, and there are social expectations. So it could be really, really interesting to come from this perspective. With addictions, I would always talk, I would take very extensive medical history because you really need to clarify what is the reason for addictions. Work in this example, but it could be families when everybody drinks and everybody smokes or plays cards. In some cases, it could be really innocent habit, which person picked up temporarily in order to cope with a particular stressful situation, particular several years or several months of huge stress, and they drink much more. And the situation calms down and they start drinking less. So this is not an addiction as such, because for them it was obviously just short-term coping mechanism. It wasn't great, but it was not a proper addiction. Second level we work on addiction training is more advanced Colourpuncture, so this is not something that obviously will make sense for you if you're not familiar with the concept of Greek medicine, because with traditional Greek medicine, they looked into all those things. So when there is a Pisces influence, and basically there is this tendency to escape, there is a tendency to escape in this ideal world which should be, but which isn't. So people have trouble relating to what is because their surroundings, their immediate surroundings, or the world at large seems to be too hostile for them. it's too harsh. And they are very, very sensitive souls. So very often this is the case with people who are highly creative, musicians, artists, creative people. So probably that explains why in certain industries this is more prevalent than in others. There are treatments for that in Colourpuncture when we work on bodily correspondences for Pisces and Neptune. So we talked about family. We use treatment which is more or less broadly can be seen as substitute of family constellation technique in Colourpuncture. And the beauty of this particular treatment is that you can actually it's all done on your fingertips, so you can do it so you can do it on yourself. So this is really beautiful. Neptune treatments you can do on yourself because they're all done on face, most of them. And there is also a third approach in this addiction training is from perspective of transmitter relays. Now, transmitter relays is a famous treatment in Colourpuncture. It's a therapy. It's a huge therapy. Within one treatment, many, many points and zones and circles. It's a long treatment. And it's long in terms of sequence. You need to have at least 10 or 12 transmitter relays. Transmitter relay therapy is designed to reframe the whole experience from a level of body. So remember that Peter Mendel calls Colourpuncture non-verbal psychology. So we are working through the skin, we are working through the body, through the meridian and other energy pathways in order to talk to soul and spirit. Transmitter relays in particular are designed to reframe our experience from birth, which is 0 years of age, to 25. And 25 is the age of our ultimate maturity, physical, emotional, psychological, social, spiritual. Before we are 25, on a level of brain rhythms, we are not quite completely adult, no matter how interesting it sounds, because we all believe that we are very grown up at 16. The premise here is that whatever happens after 25 is a repetition of something that went on before. Working long term with a patient and you're observing their life history, you can see repetition of their main internal conflicts, which they acquired before the age of 25, repeated in different shape and form. It's almost like people really go for what is called traumatic reenactments. They try to somehow create or somehow they manage to attract situation which is similar to situation which was traumatic for them before 25. And they're unconsciously trying to resolve the situation with better resources at this time when they're grown up. The intention of life is very, very constructive, but often it doesn't find its outlet. Very often we just attract this type of situation, but we are not equipped with tools. We are in better power for sure than when we were children, but sometimes we lack spiritual maturity, if you wish, to fully go for resolution of the conflict on a conscious level. And this is where Colourpuncture comes in, because basically then we talk with the body, through the body, with the soul, through the body, and then we reframe it through the body on a level of this non-verbal psychology. Transmitter relays, I would always talk a lot with people when they're going through transmitter therapy process, and it's a huge process, and it's very interesting because as a therapist, you also go on transmitter journey with your patient. This is remarkable.